Let's go, brother. Do you just want to crack? We'll give these a crack, and we're probably a bit far away to cheers. But anyone that's watching, once again, sorry to disappoint. We are on the sparklings, not on the beers. All right, so we've up for another episode of Beers and Buying, and today I've got the amazing Jordan Strudwick from Stroud Property, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Mate, I always like to. Obviously, we just had a bit of a chat off air anyway, but I like to get an understanding of kind of where someone's from. I know you obviously have a bit online and about kind of how you got into real estate, but I just kind of like to peel it back and sort of see where everything started out. So, like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And then kind of how did you get into property?
Oh, cool. I grew up in Ipswich, so, hourish away from here. I grew up with mum, dad, brothers, normal kind of upbringing with a lot of siblings, a lot of love. And then I live down the Gold Coast now, but before that, I won't jump ahead too much. I went to St. Peter Claver College. Before that, I went to a little private school for primary school, which had like 100 kids. Like, it didn't really kind of get you used to, real life. And then you went to high school and there's like 1,000 kids and it was hectic. So I went to St. Peter Claver there. Finished grade 12 there, was house captain, all of those types of things, always kind of had natural leadership kind of stuff. Then I went into my first job at Macca's, did that for a few years, and then went into being a car mechanic, did my apprenticeship.
Really?
For a couple of years. My dad was a mechanic, so like it was always like, oh, come in, you can, run the family business, that type of thing. And then was no good at that. Then I built fences for a little while, and then I got into cleaning cars, and then from cleaning cars I got into selling cars. From selling cars I tried to start my own business, which went bust, and then when that all hit the fan, I jumped into real estate in my mid-20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Geez, I feel like we could probably talk for hours about that.
Yeah. I'm trying to turn it. It's funny, I said before too, like, oh, I had a normal life. I didn't really. Like, there's so many different podcasts where I had a pretty next level life. I had one normal side of the family, one hectic side of the family. Like, my mom had me at 17 and my dad went to jail when I was 2, my real dad.
Wow.
And he was a wild cat. But yeah, there's a lot there. And I think I was saying this to you before off air, I just spoke at a fairly big event with about 300 people following Mal Meninga, and, which was tough. But, I talked a lot more about, like, I guess the personal journey, and I think the personal development side of business. And I think that's why as a leader in real estate, that's why I've probably popped off a little bit, because it's so not just, hey, this is real estate, let's talk about the market. It's more, hey, let's chat about deeper business things.
Yeah, unreal. We'll maybe talk a bit more off air about that. That's super interesting, mate. And so when you like got into real estate, was it a matter of like it was this instant love? Were you like, oh, this is for me, or was it a bit of a slow burn, or how did that kind of take off? And maybe just take us through, where you started and then kind of where you are now with Stroud.
Yeah, it was an instant love. So like, it was a tough slog. So I started like commission only.
Yeah.
Which you could legally do that back in the day. And at the time, like, I had negative 50 grand from the business that I tried to start before, which was not the best way to start commission only. But where I fell in love with real estate, like I still remember my very first listing, man. My very first listing, husband's name was Dion, wife's name was Jess. They had 2 kids, Selena and Ariana, and his mum's name was Kay. And I ended up selling Kay's house later down the track. And I remember, like, the first houseman, I remember he actually called, so this Dion dude called the office and he's like, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so agent. And that agent that I was looking for was actually one of our competitors. And I was like, oh man, I think you've called the wrong office. And I was like, I'm from another real estate. Do you want a second opinion? He's like, yeah, perfect. Come out at 3:00. And I was like, sweet, no worries. And then he called me at like 1:00 and he's like, oh, hey man, I got a hold of that other agent I was supposed to get a hold of. Don't worry about coming out. And I said, listen, just, I've already got all the information ready. It doesn't hurt to get a different opinion. Can I please just come out at 3:00 still, And he was like, oh, okay, no worries. And I remember I did the whole entire listing presentation. He had an R32, those R32 Skylines. An R32 Skyline, and I knew he loved that car. I love those cars too. And we did the whole listing presentation. Like, we quickly toured the house, and then I just stood at the back of his ute, and that car was there, and we're just talking about the car. And I was just real with him, and I just said to him, I said, Dion, I just want to let you know, if you trust me with your home, that it'll be the first opportunity that I ever get. And I've always been like that right from the start. I'll always just be very transparent and upfront. Some people are like, oh, I don't want people to not know that I don't know what
Yeah,
I'm doing.
I've sold heaps of houses. Or
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I never lied, bro. It's
Yeah.
straight down the line. And I said, but I promise you this. I said, I'll work it harder than anybody else. And he was like, okay. And then he's like, my wife's not home. I was like, when's she home? 5. And he's like, 5 o'clock. I said, can I come back at 5? So I went back there at 5. I competed with 6 agents on this listing, by the way.
Wow.
And I thought I thought Jess would be really chill. And Jess was, she was a hard ass. So she was in defense. And I remember she came home, she had like all her defense kit on, shook my hand, looked me straight in the eyes, and she was like, Jordan, I just want you to know, I'm testing you right now to see whether I'm going to trust you with my home. And on the inside, bro, I was like, oh man, this is wild. But on the outside, I was like, yep, I know you are, and I know I'm the best person for the job. Long story short, got the listing, signed it on the spot with them that afternoon. I did the open home the next weekend. They needed 270 grand, and he said it to me. He said, oh, look, we need to, this is years ago, man. Imagine if I like that now.
Yeah.
But he's like, I need 270 grand for the house. And I remember I said to him, Dion, I don't, respectfully, I don't care what you need. I want to know how much I can get. And that's one thing I've always done as an agent, always pushed as much as I can for my vendors. And first week on market, 4 days, had an offer at 270, and most agents would just take it. He was happy with that. Got that offer from 270 to 280, 280 to 285, 285 to 299.
Wow.
And I still remember the day, and this is where I fell in love with real estate. I remember I went into the house, and the kids were playing in the lounge room, and then himself and Jess were sitting at the table. We were sitting at the end. I was sitting at one end, and Jess was sitting next to him. And I said, I've got an offer. I put it in front of him, 299, and he cried.
True.
Wow. Yeah, man.
Wow.
So, and I it was pretty wild. As a grown man crying. Shout out to him if he's listening, because I know he still follows along. And he just said, bro, he said, I just want to let you know. He's like, you've changed our lives. And then
awesome.
and then he opened up to me about some stuff that they kind of had going on financially, because no one ever does at the start in real estate. Everyone cards goes to the chest, and he said, man, this will change our lives. And got me a bit teary-eyed, and man, from then on, just absolutely hooked on this game, because I think, if you're in it for money, don't get me wrong, you've got to have that hunger for money in a great life, but like I get the real kick out of helping people, like, and they've got a problem, like you be the solution to the problem. So that was the first one I did. So my first 2 years, then, I went into kind of having 2 years, kind of in and out, like of real estate, like where like, 1 minute you're working really hard, next minute you're doing nothing, then you're working hard, then you're doing nothing. It just wasn't consistent.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point about 2 years in where I was dead broke. I had $2.53 in the bank. I remember a lot of people have heard this story, so I won't go on it for too long. And I was working 2 jobs. So I was cladding houses in the morning from 7 till 3 down at where's Coomera? Down at Coomera.
Yeah.
And then I would go back and do real estate in the afternoon. And I remember I was on the way to one of the biggest listing presentations I've ever been to in my career at this point, 2 years in, and I had $2.53 in the bank, and I had to go call my mum, ask for some fuel money. She said she wasn't going to give it to me because she already given me fuel money. And I was in this old shitty Mitsubishi Outlander. He said like kicked the bumper in and stuff, and I used to park it down the road. Nothing wrong with Mitsubishi Outlanders. Anyone who drives them. And I remember I went and paid, and I put $2.53 in my car. Like it's all I had, but I was like, I'll just put this in. Hopefully this will get me there. And I just remember this lady, this little older lady, and just the way she looked at me. I was wearing a suit, and she just looked at me like with just like the head tilt, where she was like, what the heck? Like what are you doing? $2.53. This is weird. And I remember I drove off from there, man, and I just had this like ultimate breakdown, like one of those sliding door moments where I just cried, and I was like, okay, am I going to go back to selling cars? No. And I was like, that was the first moment where I feel like I fully committed to real estate, and I was like, nah, this is it. Like I'm going to make it.
Was that? Do you think it was the look? Was it something about that particular moment?
I think it wasn't the look. It was the build up to the look, right?
Gotcha,
It was the grind. Like it's hard, man. You want to make an enormous amount of money, or you just want to do well. Like it's tough, when you're trying to get your brand or get your name off the ground. This is when I was still in an agency, and I think the look was just the tipping point where it's like, what am I doing? Like, is this really my life? Like, is this what I'm gonna do with my life? And and it's funny, like where Strud is today, our head office that we have is actually on the exact same road that I had that mental breakdown on. Yeah, man, like wild, bro, like fully, like who would have thought on this main drag there. So I think it was just the look.
Yeah.
I think it was the look in her eyes of, do you know what it was, bro? It was pity. She had pity in her eyes. Like she had this, are you okay look? Like I'm not going to say anything to you, but are you sweet? And I remember as soon as I jumped in that car, man, just lost it. You know, struggling financially, negative 40 grand in the bank, working 2 jobs. Like, you know, I think we've all been there before where it's just, you know, enough's enough. And then after that, you know, I committed, called my best mate. I said, hey, bro, someone to call you. He could hear I was crying. He's like, are you sweet? I'm like, I'm all good. So I'm calling to promise you and promise myself I'm going to be so successful.
Wow.
Right here, right now, I'm going to make it. And the next 12 months, I wrote 500,000 in comms, which back then was big. This is 6 years ago. Or 500,000 in comms and bought my first house and changed my life, man. You know.
What? And so with you like committing to that, do you think that was just the biggest thing? Was like what was the big? Was it just a mindset shift more than anything?
There was just no plan B. The whole entire time, and I didn't realize this until I was 2 years in. I kept, like Denzel Washington says, it's great. Like don't fall back, fall forward. And I kept thinking, because like, you know, everyone, you know, it's what you get trained from your parents and things like, get a trade so you can fall back on it. Get a degree so you can fall back on it. Like, don't fall back, fall forward on things in life. And I think for me, I was always like, oh, well, I can go back to the car industry and make, you know, 120, 150 grand a year. And I didn't realize how much I kept thinking about that, you know, until I got to that position where I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to do this. Like, I'm gonna have to go back to that industry. And I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. And I think you get to that point where there's enough pain that you're like that you're willing to then make a change from there. And then from then, man, like I just locked in. Like there was no plan B. It was like Eye of the Tiger. Like it was
crazy.
It was next level. You know?
And how long ago was that? So like when did you actually? And so how long after that until you started Strud?
So that would have been 6-7 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah, so that would have been 6-7 years ago now. So I wrote 500 that next year. Then the year after that, I cracked $1 million. The year after that, I did 1.2. I was doing 102 deals a year. So before I started Strud, I was selling 102 residential properties a year in Ipswich. The average house price back then was $460, $480. You know, I should have kept selling, man. Kept selling, bro.
Or buying them. Or buying them, right?
I could have kept buying them. We bought a few, but there was a lot that I could have bought at that time. And then I started Strud. So I would have been 4 or 5 years into real estate. Strud's 3.5 years old now.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's 3.5 years old now, and that's
how many people you got there now at Strud?
So we have 70 staff across all the businesses now, which is wild. And it's actually funny. Like I said this at the speech the other day, man. Like, you know, not last month, like in the last 3 months. You know, 3 months ago we sold $50 million worth of property, and we're like, holy crap, broke a record. The month after, we sold $50 million worth of property. I was like, okay, that's cool. And then last month we sold $68 million worth of property. So,
wow.
So close to 170 mil worth of property in the last 3 months, which is wild. And when you consider back then, you know, to write $500,000 in GCI, that's 6 years ago. That was close to $20 million worth of property, you know, in a year.
Wow.
Like, you know, and you can do that in a month. So. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, man. Like the whole Strud thing.
Do you I hear a lot of successful business people, they talk about like that imposter syndrome. Do you like get that a bit in terms of like from obviously where you've come from?
Yeah, all the time, man. Like, you know, like the other day before I went and spoke at that event, you know, there's 300 people at this event. You know, Oliver Lavers was there. He's someone I really appreciate in the industry and respect what he's done. You know, Mal Meninga, I'm following Mal Meninga, and I was literally closing out the show. So I was the last speaker of the day, and before I went out there, they were like, "Oh, do you need anything?" And I'm like, I don't know, just have an ambulance on speed dial and a stretcher. Because, like, man, my heart was, like, beating out of my chest. And, like, because you just automatically think, like, why would anyone want to hear what I've got to say, you know? Because I think deep down you still always feel like that, I don't know, like that young kid, like, you know, in those moments anyway.
Yeah.
And then you get out there, you do well on it, and it's all good. So, yeah, imposter syndrome, massively. And then I think it's something that I'm trying to get used to with Strud now, because I'm still very much a very real human. Like I don't try to. I think the ego can really ruin a lot of people.
Yeah,
and that's something that I'm very conscious of, and my wife is very conscious of. She's always, you know, keeping me grounded.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'd say I'd get imposter syndrome for sure.
Yeah. Oh, geez. I mean, like that's just, it's crazy to go, in particular in like that space of time. Like really, like you know what I mean. If you're like, you know, had Strud for 5 or 6 years, like even double that, and then maybe you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. But I mean, geez, like 70 staff. I mean, we've got, what have I got? I think I've got 7 or 8 in total. And sometimes I'm like, I feel like my head's going to explode. But anyway, And so what particular areas of Ipswich is Strud looking after? Are you doing like pretty much everywhere out
Yeah,
there?
pretty
Or?
much. So everywhere Ipswich is a greater region. Like Ipswich is great. So we do, Carolee, Ripley, Collingwood Park, Yamanta, like just everywhere in Ipswich. And Ipswich is a bit of a generalized place too, because you find a lot of the buyers now that are coming into those markets, they don't really care too much about the suburb. They're just like, okay, Ipswich is a greater region.
Yeah.
So essentially everywhere in Ipswich, and it's absolutely pumping out there. Like I've said it to my whole entire team. Like I reckon in 2 years' time, I won't be surprised if you won't get a property sub $1 million out there.
You know what it makes me think about? Because my wife's actually from out at Boona.
Oh really? Yeah, Tribby.
Yeah. So we go out there quite a bit, and so yeah, she grew up out there.
Do you know Harrisville out that way?
Yeah.
So my dad used to own the mechanical shop at
Oh
Harrisville
really?
there,
Yeah. My wife's dad worked at Churchill Abattoir before it got closed down. Anyway. But mate, like I think the perception, like Ipswich, if we were talking like 10 years ago, I think Ipswich had a bit of that perception, like I would move to Ipswich. Like it always thought it maybe was a little bit hard to get to, particularly like into Brisbane City. I think that's just changed, and partially probably due to like infrastructure and the Legacy Way and just the roads. It's just a lot easier to get to now. But I often think about, let's say I compared it to somewhere like North Lakes. If you went north, right? And like North Lakes, you would struggle to get something under $1 million. Like it's so expensive around there. And it's probably, when you think about like from the city aspect, it's probably like very similar in terms of distance.
Yeah, literally.
So, I mean, the West, it's only a matter of time before, well, I personally think that it's going to go.
Oh man, Ipswich is a beautiful, like a lot of people don't know, like Ipswich was actually supposed to be the capital of Queensland before Brisbane back in the day.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen because Brisbane had the port. You go out to Ipswich, it's some of the most beautiful Queenslander homes that you'll ever see. Late 1800s, early 1900s. My wife and I renovated one not long ago. There was a 2-bed, 1-bath. We made it a 3-bed, 2-bath. I think it was built in 1920.
Wow.
Some beautiful schools like Ipswich Grammar, St Eddie's, St Peter Claver, and even Ipswich Grammar. Like people will move to Ipswich to put their kids into Ipswich Grammar. It is one of the best schools literally in the country.
Yeah.
A lot of great sports people are now starting to come out of Ipswich, and even Ipswich State High. Like we sponsor Ipswich State High. They've got some phenomenal rugby league players that are coming out of there. They've got a great rugby league program that we sponsor.
They're in the Alfie Langer Cup or something like that, aren't they? Yeah.
And there's and then just even development wise, like you got Greater Springfield, like there's just parks everywhere, and really it's just affordability. You can still buy a decent home in Ipswich, for it's changing maybe 750, 800 grand will buy you a decent home. $1 million buys you a nice home. But a great example comparing down to here, like I've got some friends who just relocated from Ipswich. They sold the house for 1.2. Big beautiful Queensland, one of those beautiful houses in Ipswich, and then they have spent similar money down here at Eleanor.
Yeah.
And they've bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car, beautiful home, with a pool, but it's just not the same. It's just not the same level. So yeah, it's similar to Ipswich, Eleanor a few years ago. No one wanted to live in Eleanor. Like it's just I think it's affordability everywhere.
Yeah. And I think even like there's just like mass amount of development going on around Ipswich as well. Like in particularly South Ripley, I think it is.
Ripley.
Crazy, isn't it? Like driving through there, I want to say like actually it was probably like 5 or 6 years ago now. I remember there was like not much that done at all. Now it's just like it's gone.
Man, it used to be bush. So when I was young, I wrote my first. I wrote my first car off in that bush out there. Yeah, boys were stupid. You're 18 years old, and everyone used to just go on bush bash.
Yeah,
that was whatever. On a after school or whatever, everyone would just go out to the bush and just do laps.
Some developers had to pick that up and
literally. And now developers have just killed it out there. We did it right. We actually owned a 5-acre property out at South Ripley.
Oh wow, yeah.
That we sold maybe a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, that we held for a year and a half ish. But yeah, it's a crazy area out there.
Would you say that one's been your best buy so far? Personally?
Nah. We've done a few. It's hard to know what. There's been a lot. We've done we've just bought our 11th home in the last 6 years. So
awesome.
Yeah, so we'll buy, renovate, flip.
Yeah.
Probably the best buy that we've got is something I've got in the works at the moment. So already bought it. Myself and a handful of our friends, we bought 3 properties all next to each other across from the Ipswich Jets Oval in Ipswich.
Yep.
zoned for 10-story development. So we're about 2 months away from DA approval to have, some 2,000 square meters and 90 units.
Wow.
And then we're either going to flick it with the DA, but we've also been talking about funding it and potentially doing the build, like maybe getting the government or something like that. So yeah, like a mixture of 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So I think we'll all do well. That hopefully, because we haven't sold it yet, that'll be the best. That'll be the best buy.
Yeah. Actually, so you just touched on something really important there, and particularly for probably anybody listening that wants to go down that avenue of buying, doing it up, and then getting rid of it and making some cash out of it. What would kind of be the key areas that you would look for if you were going to go buy something and go down? Obviously, it depends on the property, but where have you kind of found that you've had some success?
Look,
in the past?
I think I always look at it with some basic fundamentals. Like the money's always in the buying. Like you can buy a house in the best area ever, and you overpay for it, and you've lost money. You know, so money is always in the buying. I always look generally for stuff that we can do really quick uplift to. So like you're not doing massive big building extensions and all these types of things. A great example, the one that my wife just did recently, it was 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom, but there was one of those big sleep outs, and and there was 2 living areas, which a house like that of that size didn't need 2 living areas. So we sheeted up one of the living areas to turn it into a 3 bedroom, and then that's the one that had the sunroom on it. So we turned that into an ensuite. So all of a sudden, it goes from being a 2-1 to a 3-2. Very quick improvement. And that particular home, she did very well. A couple $100,000 out of that in 6 to 12 months. We talked about living there. That was going to be the plan, but then that didn't end up happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the money's always in the buying, man. And don't ever get emotional. Don't ever overpay. So I'll always know where. I'll always have a kind of, what's, bargain price. So if we're like stoked to get it for that price, what's our probable price? Would be like okay to pay that price, and what's our walk away price? And as long as there's at least a 30% margin in it, all good.
Yeah.
And it's always gonna cost you more. So like I see it with a lot of people. They're like, oh, bathroom's gonna cost 10 grand. For me, on all of our stuff, it'll be like, okay, cool, bathroom's gonna cost 20 grand. It might only cost 10 grand, but you'd rather be over than be under.
Yeah. Could really stop some people in their tracks as well, can't it? Invest too much into the property, go to sell it, could end up
100%.
in a negative position. What's your thoughts on the market at the moment, other than obviously it's hot, right? So in the areas that you're kind of looking after, how would you kind of describe it right now?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think it's really good. It's a, obviously interest rates are going down. I think we're in for a really good 5 to 10 years. I don't see what can stop it. I think we're going to ride a decent wave until 2032, until the Olympic Games, and see what happens after that. But that's like 7 years away. Like that's a fair while away. I think that owners want premiums. I think every owner's wanted a premium, which is fair. With what's happening in the market. And I think we're probably at a bit of a point where buyers are like enough's enough kind of thing. Like it's really probably getting less, whether it's Ipswich or the Gold Coast or wherever. Owners want X amount. And so if you go back 3 years ago, like you couldn't even get buyers to a property most of the time. If you had 10 groups or a house in 2 months, you were killing it.
Yeah.
Whereas now you'll get 10 groups on a weekend with 5 offers, and then an owner's saying, well, no, I want to wait. And then so it's like it's a funny thing. I think there will be a bit of a ceiling for a period of time, but I still think there's going to be a lot of interstate. There's obviously a lot of migration that's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of I think there's a lot of intergenerational wealth that's going to start hitting. Like, where we live, for example, down at Palmy, like we look at all the houses on the canals down there. You can't buy a house on the canal in Palm Beach for less than $3 million now.
Yeah.
And there's 500 houses there. But the funniest thing is that, just a guesstimate, but I reckon probably 90% of them would be unencumbered, where they're owned by someone who's owned it for 20 years. And, once that money starts, going in, because a lot of those people are now selling, they're going into homes, they're getting a bit older. Once that money starts going into the economy, down to their kids and grandkids, and they start reinvesting back in the market, like, I think all in all, I think we're in for a really, really good few years. I don't see what could stop it.
And could you say the same thing about even Ipswich, like I'm saying Ipswich, I'm saying that broadly, like more the scenic rim, like, Harrisville, those sort of areas, we're going to start to see more development of people go, I can chop this up and make some money out of it, right?
100%. It's happening now. Like those areas out a little bit further, like Plainlands and things like that.
Yeah.
A great example, we have an agent, Jeremy, he specializes out in that Plainsland region. He just sold a property out there. It was, I don't know, might have been 10 acres. Cool property, sold it for $2 million.
Yeah.
Plainlands. It's like half an hour to 40 minutes past Ipswich.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And like, there's some of those developments where they're an acre block, they've put like a Hallmark home or something like that on there. Now they've built it for 650, 700. They're selling them for 1.2 million out there now.
Yeah.
So I think what COVID did as well, it really it showed everyone that you can work from home.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to be at the office all the time. A great example, before I came here, like I went to the office this morning, ran a meeting from 9 till 10, from 10 till whatever before I got ready here. I played Hot Wheels with my son, because it was his birthday. It was his birthday on Saturday. So, when was it? His birthday last week, but his birthday party on Saturday.
Yeah.
And, I just hung out with him for a minute because I knew I was going to come and do this, So I think this day and age, like, you can work from home and you can have that flexibility if you're willing to get the work done.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people going down to 4-day work weeks and all of those types of things.
Yeah. It's more acceptable as well to hear you, whether it's your kids screaming in the background or something. I was talking about this with someone the other day, and let's say it was 3 or 4 years ago. If you're on the phone to a client or something like that, and they heard your kid screaming in the background, you would almost be a bit embarrassed.
Oh yeah, literally.
Now people are laughing and they don't care. It's just like the new norm, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And so what's next for Strud then? Obviously, like you're down the Goldie now, right?
Yeah.
Do you see an expansion? I know obviously you're doing some properties down here as well,
right?
Well,
we have an office. So we got an office at Palm Beach now. Like we've just listed a beautiful property out at Currumbin.
Yeah.
We're taking it with a bit of a different approach down the Gold Coast. I probably made some mistakes when we launched the office down here, and where I was like, what, let's just, guns a-blazing, let's just go. No one knows the brand down here, which is difficult. Like in Ipswich, I can go to any house and most of them are like, oh, Strudwick, oh, you're the real estate guy, But yeah, I've got, one of my best mates down here. He's just moved. He's the one who's moved to Eleanor. He's down here in the office with me. He was working at Stroud in Ipswich. So just him and I, we're selling a few. Like we've got a couple coming up at Palmy. Got one at Currumbin at the moment. We just sold one at Helensvale, I think it is. Yeah, Helensvale. And then we've got one at, Upper Coomera coming up. So just doing, bits and pieces down here.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely over the long term, we will be down here. And it's been interesting too, because I've had a lot of lead agents that have wanted to jump into Strud down here, but I really wanted to build it from our DNA, not another lead agent's DNA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Mate, I think that's pretty much it anyway.
Sweet.
Really appreciate your time. Obviously your stories, I know obviously we were talking a little bit earlier, but I'm going to go back and listen to a bit more about where everything started for you. And for anyone that wants to give him a follow, is it Jordan?
Yeah, just Jordan Strudwick on Instagram.
There you go. Awesome. Mate, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.